Hey everybody, welcome to Hacker Practice, the show where I interview brilliant technologists and entrepreneurs to learn their systems and strategies for excelling at their field. My name is Justice Epen and I'll be your host today. Our guest is a master conversationalist. I've seen him strike up engaging discussions with everyone from valets to Fortune 500 CEOs. That alone would make him impressive, but our guest is also a hardcore hacker. I first knew him as the head of hardware at a startup that we worked together at. He graduated from high school at age 16 to pursue a life of engineering and entrepreneurship, and his hacking experience is extremely diverse. I'm pleased to welcome to the show Peter Dunbar. Pete, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Justice. It's a warm and beautiful winter Monday here in Boston, and I've got absolutely no complaints.
Wonderful. Now, we were in Boston when we met. Can you tell me, do you remember the story of how we met, like the day of?
Oh, I absolutely do. We were at Launch Academy at an event, and I remember approaching you, and we were talking about just life hacking in general, and we connected. I remember the moment we were talking about utilizing these things not only in our own life, little tips and tricks, but really the conversation exploded when we started thinking about how we can use technology to deliver those same kind of tools to a larger population. And I remember right after it was within days, I think, I was over and we actually ended up working together just probably 3 or 4 days after that conversation. So, yeah, absolutely. It was a nice, I believe, April afternoon.
Right. And I want to share my side of this story because I think it's a really funny story. I was running the software department at Pavlok. I was actually at that time the only employee, so I was actually just building the software product. And I went to Launch Academy to hire some engineers, and it was the career day. Launch Academy is a boot camp for learning Ruby on Rails development in 10 weeks. And so I went there to pick up some new talent, and I meet you, Pete, and you're the one person in the class who did not bring a resume to career day. And I remember thinking, this guy, what a great first impression. Then within 3 days, you had stalked me down on the internet, found out who the CEO of my company was, gotten in touch with him, came in for an interview, and gotten the job on the spot. And my impression of you did a complete 180 because I was so impressed. And it was really the first. I knew you were a great conversationalist because even though you forgot your resume, I still thought you were a really interesting and engaging guy. But then you proved it by showing up and getting a job in a couple of days. Now, at that time, you were deep into the technical side. You were running the hardware department at a wearables startup. What is your background in technology?
Well, so I started playing around with technology when I was young. Hacking things together has always been fun. I grew up in northern Maine, and we had a very small mathematics department, and coincidentally, we ended up with a small robotics department at our school, which we were very grateful for. But we ended up being able to, at a young age, play around with some really cool technology. Basically built a Roomba before Roomba came out, which a lot of fun things. So, I mean, like being able to be a young kid and having access to tools like let's build a machine that can launch free throws from the 3-point line or something, those were fun challenges at that age. And being able to get hands-on and dirty with a problem and realize that there's way more than one way to solve it. So it's actually relative justice to how you're saying, I showed up without a resume that day. And it's like, well, everybody tells you need a resume to get a job, right? That works great for the masses, but what works best is being able to talk to people. So when you start thinking about technology and knowing that there's really limitless possibilities, the same goes for when you're starting to think about having conversations with people and how you want to reach an objective. It just becomes a problem-solving opportunity. And quite frankly, I hate writing resumes. I hate boasting about myself. I don't have a lot of fun doing it. So it's great to hear you say some nice things, Justice. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to that hacking element. I think there's so much more to that word than
Well, talk me through that. What does it mean to you? Because I want to jump into some of the learning and educational side of the discussion, but I want to know, what does hacking mean to you?
Hacking is, to me, it's not even, it's more of a lifestyle at some points, Justice, because it's a mindset that you need to adopt when you're looking at problem solving. When you think about, maybe you have a large Fortune 500 company that's pushing a lot of e-commerce online. Well, you know what? Maybe they have a huge mobile app or a web app. Well, frankly, there's going to be people that are going to find vulnerabilities in that system, and you need to find ways of really looking at a problem where ultimately, let's say the best way to put this is, everybody out there is going to do something to come at you and be malicious because they're just trying to solve a problem as well. A hacker, by the very nature, is simply problem solving. They know there's a weakness. They're going to find it. They're going to exploit it. They're going to learn methods to accomplish what they want. And eventually they're going to succeed.
And it's important to note that a lot of hackers who do malicious things aren't doing it with a malicious intent. They are just playing around a lot of the time. And that's the real mentality, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely, Justice. And that's what it is. I think you're absolutely right, where they're not necessarily malicious. They're just investigating. They're learning. They're in a process. Maybe they don't understand what they're doing is a little bit malicious. If you're setting off DDoS attacks because you think it's cool, is a lot different than if you're trying to take down the company. But ultimately, when you think about that as terms of a lifestyle, I mean, that applies to absolutely everything. Like I never filled out I went to Clarkson University when I was 16. I transferred into another school, finished up with an engineering management and business degree. I never once filled out a college application.
No resumes, no applications required.
I never sent anybody I crushed my SATs, but I never had to send them in. And why did this happen? It's because of conversation. So when I think about hacking, that's why I think it's a lifestyle, because it's something that you need to employ into every aspect of your life. Because you're in software development, Justice. You understand that, quite frankly, some of the hardest problems to solve, you solve them when you're not thinking about it. And the more you start thinking about living a life where you're thinking about pushing the limits of problem solving to where it really does become hacking, that's where you're going to find the most results from, tackling hard problems, or thinking of that solution that nobody else has thought of yet.
So you graduated from high school at age 16, and you went on to study. What were you studying at Clarkson?
Aeronautical engineering.
Okay. Tell me about your philosophy of education. How did you make that decision?
Well, at that time, Justice, I'll tell you, I started with aeronautical engineering. It's not what I finished in. At 16, I pretty much accomplished all of the math and science that I could in my high school. So I was enrolled at Colby College I was about to be enrolled at Colby College for my senior year for my classes. And I ended up actually doing a program at Clarkson University over the summer before my senior year. And it was on the aesthetics and engineering of wheelchairs. So essentially, we had this really cool guy that volunteered his summer to come and work with us when we were teenagers. And he was in a wheelchair. But this guy was like your stereotypical biker dude. And he wanted a wheelchair that was going to be a little bit more aesthetic, something that related to his lifestyle. And we spent the summer engineering, designing a new wheelchair, designing new rims, trying to make it cool, something that would relate to him. And at the end of that program, I got pulled into the headmaster's office. They asked me if 3 weeks they said school's starting up in 3 weeks. If you want, you can come here instead of going back to high school. So I took him up on the offer. But it was after about my sophomore year that I realized that engineering as the profession, and I have so much respect for career engineers. So I'm talking about, the guys that we rely on to make our bridges safe and our jets fly, and any gamut of responsibility. I have a lot of respect for them, but it just wasn't for me. I wanted to think about the problems from a little bit more outside and not so concrete on an objective. And I'll be honest with you, Justice, there was one situation that led me away from going down that road, and I'll never forget it. I walked into my advisor's office. I was talking to him about, and I wanted to find my path. I wanted to know where I was going. And he told me a story about a project he'd been working on for 10 years, and he was so proud of it. And it was the engineering of a wingtip for a certain Boeing jet. And quite frankly, it scared me to think that I'd spend 10 years trying to solve one problem like that. Whereas what really excites me is the ability to get my feet wet with a lot of different problems and not just one task over that long of a period of time. I wanted to be more involved in business and critical thinking as far as how to grow a business and not necessarily build one particular product.
And you're such a people person that I would be really saddened if you spent 90% of your time not interacting with people.
I don't think I could handle it. It was really deafening to think about the fact that I'd get stuck in a cubicle for a long period of time, which, don't get me wrong, I don't want to discourage anybody that's listening from going down the field of engineering. If you love it, you love it, and I encourage you to do it. But there's a lot of folks that if your heart's not in it, you're not going to have the most rewarding career.
Truth. So let's fast forward to when we were working together, because I know that there are some cool stories about us working on this wearable together. Let's start from the beginning. Day one, what were you doing? And then let's just walk me through, sort of the life cycle of the product and some of the major milestones that we hit, as we were working together. Because we moved very, very quickly for a hardware startup.
Yeah, we moved very quickly. I think that for the benefit of this conversation, let's really focus on the tech and some of those problems that we solved there. I think the business is as it is, still has its own issues relating to growth and really viability of that product itself. But I think that I know that I learned a tremendous amount from that project, and really it was more so a matter of the teamwork that was involved, because not one person's going to build what we built. It requires a team. And
we had a pretty amazing engineering team, especially on the hardware side.
Oh, on the between hardware and software, I mean, it really was shake and bake. We worked together side by side on all of those things, and being able to build out that team, it was a really unique opportunity, Justice. And I think we're both very grateful for that opportunity, because, with you leading software and me really taking charge of the hardware, we looked at this project as something that had a lot of opportunity to it, and it was one giant thing to problem solve.
So talk me through the specification. It was a wearable device that was Bluetooth connected. It could deliver stimulus to the wearer. On the hardware side, what does that look like in terms of components and parts?
Yeah, so in terms of parts, this is what makes the whole Internet of Things movement so cool, is that the parts to do this stuff has gotten really, really cheap. Where what you're talking about, you and I, when we talk about manufacturing massive amounts of units, you're talking about pennies on the dollar compared to what these things sell at retail. I mean, like that. And what's amazing by that is that it means that if you're a small startup company and you want to make a wearable or you want to make some Internet of Things product, the barrier to entry in this industry is extremely low. We partnered with Blue Giga, who's now been bought out by another firm. I forget who they've been bought out by, but a really cool microcontroller that would allow us to connect to essentially the mobile phone over low energy Bluetooth, so you can have a device that doesn't need to get charged for weeks on a time. I mean, if you're using one of these same microcontrollers for, say, a basic implementation of, say, a temperature gauge that you put outside on your porch, you won't need to change that battery for over a year. So some really, really cool ways that we can miniaturize this stuff and really make it accessible to the types of applications that we're going after. So we had a small microcontroller unit that was hooked to a series of circuits that provided the stimulus, which was electric in this case, most of the time. Sometimes it was vibratory, sometimes it was audio.
And so you need different components for each of those stimuli.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting is when you think about it, when your team would come up with a great idea, our team would have to sit back and say, okay, this is the type of action that the software team wants to deliver to the users. We had to think about, all right, well, how are we actually going to build this, right? We need to prototype it. We need to design it. It's something that needs to be tangible that you can hold in your hand. And same goes for us on the on the hardware side. I could research a new chip, a new microcontroller that had new features, or a new, even the charging circuit that we had. So being able to actually tell the user that, oh, your battery is at 65%, right? That actually takes a lot of work in terms of building out the hardware. So it was cool whenever we got to find a new piece of hardware technology that would open up a whole new realm of possibilities for the software team to deliver a user experience that was a little bit more pleasing,
So
right?
let me ask you this. What was the biggest challenge for you? And if you were talking to someone, let's say there's someone listening right now that's thinking about getting into technology, or maybe who just graduated from college, where do you think the biggest challenge was for us, and where would you advise that person? What area of the technology would you advise that person to study to be the most useful to up and coming hardware startups?
Great question. So the biggest problem that we had, Justice, and it's sad that it wasn't the technology. It's not actually the software development. It's not the hardware development. For me, the hardest challenge that I saw, and if we're talking about building a hardware product, right, even with a software product, I think it's still relevant, but delivering that final product takes resources. Mm-hmm. So you can sit in your office and prototype a really cool device, but you also have to bring that thing to market. You have to make a lot of units, right? And so that takes a lot of challenges that a lot of people, quite frankly, aren't exposed to. Even if you're sitting at home with a 3D printer, you've got a lot to learn before you're going off and making tools overseas and producing thousands and thousands of pieces of parts. But I think what's interesting about all that, Justice, is that there's a very good lesson that we had at our company, and I think that it's something that I've definitely carried with me, is that we did something special when we launched our product, right? Because we knew that it was going to take a lot of money to develop the hardware and to bring that to market. So what did we do? We had an amazing social media campaign, an amazing Kickstarter campaign. And so now this is where I think it's a lesson to be learned for some people that are out there saying, oh, I'm just going to go out there and get a Kickstarter and start an Indiegogo page and raise money and everybody's going to love my product. It's too often that I hear somebody saying, oh yeah, we're ready to launch. We're going to launch our Kickstarter in 3 days. And I asked them, okay, so how many people do you have on your list? Oh, what list? Right. So I think that one of the most valuable lessons that you can take away from this is that it really goes back to what we've been talking about, which is become a conversationalist, right? Have those conversations with people and start talking to people about your idea. Don't be afraid to close it off, because I'll tell you, there's so many people that are afraid to have conversations about an idea without signing an NDA. And I think that if you're going down that approach, you're thinking about it all wrong. You want to be able to go out and have conversations with people so that you can get excited about the idea. And so when we're talking about doing a Kickstarter, I think about those lessons as far as how much can you get the world excited about your idea before you even try to do one of those initiatives.
So let's talk about that, because conversation is something that I think that you're a master at. Tell me about your current role, the company that you work for, and how the art of conversation plays into you being successful at that role.
Yeah, so going from engineering to sales has been a very interesting path for me over the past couple of years. It's fun for me because I look at it no more differently than any other problem-solving activity, where there's a business, they have certain goals, their objectives aren't being met, and they're looking for a partner, a digital agency, to come in, whether it be work on their brand and marketing or redevelop their global e-commerce structure. That's, to me, it's all conversation. It's all sitting people down and having discussions about their product and trying to get them to come to ideas without necessarily you having to put it in their mouth. You want them to accept the fact that, real change needs to be made. And quite frankly, having that without having a conversation and getting down to the roots of that with somebody, you can't succeed in the sales industry, which is really fun for me because this is what it gets me excited. I wake up in the morning and I want to go talk to people. At the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned, you've seen me talking to valets and Fortune 500 CEOs. And that's something that it's a skill that I'm grateful for, is that I can get lost in conversation with somebody that, picked me up in an Uber, and start talking to them about ideas, right? It's being able to not be afraid to go in and talk to somebody. And so when you think about sales, one of the things that, to get right into, Justice, is that I hear more often than not that cold calling's dead and people are afraid to pick up the phone. When I get excited about a company I want to work with, I pick up the phone, I call them, I try to get in touch with somebody at that organization. I do everything I can as manual as I can. Now, don't forget, like, you've got systems that are not very conversational, such as, lead optimization on your website. That stuff is great and it's necessary. But at the end of the day, if you can't pick up the phone and talk to somebody, you're not going to succeed at it.
So every time we talk about this, and I ask you all the time, man, how do you get these big accounts that you get? It always comes down to, well, I heard about the company through X, Y, and Z, and so I found somebody's, phone number online, or I called their, customer support. I mean, it's always just looking at the target from all angles and trying to find some sort of entry point that you can sort of, through your art of conversation, get inside. So can you walk me through what that conversation might look like, or can you give me an example of one of these conversations?
Yeah, it's absolute brute force. There's no holds barred. You do whatever you need to do to have that conversation. Because if you're genuine about the fact that you want to work with another business, to not just benefit you, but also because you can see how what you can do can benefit them. And if you keep that at the forefront, that you're not just selling to them to make money for yourself, you're selling to them so that they can succeed with you. Now, that's a very different approach than going off and calling 200 leads a day, selling a specific product, right? So for me, I can give you an example. A company that I just worked, I just signed these guys last Thursday. I can't tell you about the name of the product, but I can tell you that they're very common. I love their hardware. I think it's beautiful engineering. They're global. They have 18 e-commerce sites around the globe. Every one of those sites is working with different payment gateways and different ERP systems, and it was a whole mess. So I got really excited when I started learning about some of their problems quite frankly, I learned about the problems from one of their support engineers. I was having coffee with him, and I started asking him some questions and found out that there were some serious operational inefficiencies, which, as a fan of their brand, and their brand being one I'd love to work with, I started doing some more research on the history of that company, ultimately to where what I did to get that deal, I've been working on this deal since October, and it closed last week. Right.
So how did it start? Did you know the customer service engineer? I mean, because that's really realistic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like their offices were in my building. I ended up meeting this support engineer, learned a little bit of background information about the company. The last thing I want to do, Justice, is take up somebody's time that's extremely valuable, say the CEO of the company or the CMO or CTO, whoever's going to be involved on that project. The last thing I want to do is show up and start asking them questions without having any idea of what they need. When I want to make that call and I really want to make that push, I want to know at least 3 or 4 options in the back of my mind as far as solutions that are going to work for them, not just because I've thought of them, but because I've actually put in work to research them. Now, when I wanted to start this meeting with this company, obviously I had some information from the support engineer, but I'm not going to ask the support engineer to put me in touch with the president of the company. And I literally just grabbed a cup of coffee, walked down the hall, found the guy's office, it's the VP, and the CFO. They share an office. And I simply asked him if they had 5 minutes. Now, that's literally how this all started. I asked him if he had 5 minutes. I told him, look, I'm a huge fan of your brand. And I noticed there's some things as far as UX and some other optimizations on the back end of your website that, I'm sure you're aware are lacking. And they're not really up to the highest standards of your brand, and I'd like to help you fix that. And I asked him if he'd be willing to just spend about 15 minutes. I said, look, it's not going to cost you any money. Worst case scenario, you walk out of there with more information than you had when you walked in. And it's no skin off my back if you're not interested in working with us, but let's just have that conversation. Right.
Now, I want to dissect that a little bit because I love this idea of going to a brand that sounds like a consumer brand, probably, that has attention to quality as being one of its sort of brand values. And then if you can identify something about their system that is not in alignment with that value, one way to get an entry point, an emotional entry point, is to call out, hey, you're out of alignment with your brand values here. Is that kind of what happened in this case?
Yeah, actually it is. It's and I think it goes to say, especially when you're thinking about the brand with a company like this, where their product really is a high quality product.
Is it a consumer product? Was I right about that?
Yeah, so I can tell you they make some of the world's best radios.
Okay,
right?
I know who you're talking about, but keep going.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're the Ron Burgundy mahogany like radios, right? So these things are pretty phenomenal. But when you look at what they're doing online, I mean, you can tell when a brand, especially with them, where they're really selling a lifestyle, right? It's not just a product. In order for you to capture that kind of money on a product, you really need to be connecting with the consumer on another level than just, I make a nice radio. You want it to be a statement piece. You want people to have conversations about it when they see it. And in order for that to really align on the brand, as far as the website, I mean, you've got to be creating that same feel digitally. And what we noticed was they weren't really doing any campaign work. And it looked like a lot of the elements, digital assets that they were putting up on their website were somewhat breaking their website a little bit. So the whole layout and the architecture of their website was causing problems. Ultimately, where what we realized was that, that their marketing strategy was being stonewalled by an architecture that was a little outdated. And they knew that they needed to make a change and start getting rid of some of their legacy systems and make it a lot easier for their CMO to just take action rather than having to work through a whole series of developers in order to simply put an image up on their website.
So the process looks something like this. You identify a company, you do as much research about them as you possibly can. You identify some problems that you are able to solve. So you can see from a distance that there's some kind of match. And then you brute force some kind of entry point, whether it's someone that you meet, that's working in their customer support, or in your case, you call a lot of people. Can you give me an example of a time? I remember you told me a great example of this maybe a year ago, where you heard something like on the radio and then you were like, oh, I'm going to call them. And then you just got them on the phone. Can you walk me through a story like that?
Yeah. So at the time, the agency that I was working with was not exactly positioned to win this deal. But for me, a lot of the fun really is chasing down these people and trying to get some information. So it was just about a year and a half ago. We had a horrible storm here in Boston. And I ended up having to rely on commuter rail services for the week, which was the worst week for me to ever choose to ride the T. Everything was shut down. You'd be waiting in North Station for hours. So I ended up interacting a lot with the Massachusetts, the MBTA website. And so I had already been familiar firsthand with how much they needed to overhaul this system to make the user experience a little bit more friendly, especially on the mobile environment. And so I got a little excited about that. I thought about it. And it wasn't until about a week later I was driving home from the office and I was listening to the radio, and I heard at the time one of the general managers over at the MBTA was live on air. So I decided to just call into the radio station and start pitching him live on the air. And I was actually just on that one phone call, just by calling into a radio show, I was able to find out exactly who I needed to talk to in that organization to send in for the RFP, that they were actively looking for agencies within the Boston area to rebuild the platform. And they actually had slated the budget for Q1 of this year. Right. So, I mean, I got that information out of calling a radio show and bothering the general manager of a company as he was just trying to answer some general questions from the public. Right. So never be afraid of like what tactics or what venue you want to reach out to somebody, because if you've done your research and you know what their pain points are and you can see a real solution for them, you're going to connect with them and you're going to get the information you need to at least get that next conversation.
Yeah, it seems like you have a sort of opportunism orientation where you are always on the lookout, and so when something happens, you can really take advantage of happening to be listening to the radio at that moment. I just love that idea. And then because you're a good conversationalist and you sort of practice the art of conversing with people in a way that makes them feel great, it always works out in some way, because now you have contacts, or even if you don't get the job, you've got the contact or, information, new networking resources.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, if anybody out there is excited about sales and you think that you're going to close every deal you ever think of or talk to, you're crazy. I mean, the hardest part of getting into sales is really the hardest thing is losing your first deal. And once you get over that, you realize that it's like, you know what? It really is just a numbers game, and you've got to be able to pick yourself up when somebody says no. And sometimes, quite honestly, Justice, I get excited about the people that say no. Sometimes it gives me an opportunity to learn more about my approach and what I can be doing to be doing a better job. Or, maybe I didn't connect with the client on a way that I can improve upon in the future, which is actually something that a lesson that I've actually taken from you, Justice, and our time working together, is I solicit as much feedback as I possibly can these days. So even if I don't lose a deal, I still get on the phone with those people after they reject the deal and say, look, let's just talk. I want to learn more about where we missed the mark, and ways that we could improve in the future. And hopefully someday we'll still have the chance to work together. So, when somebody says no, it's really an opportunity for you to reflect and grow yourself. And I thank you for that, Justice. The feedback loop has been a critical change in my workflow.
So I would love to get some specifics around that. Is there anything in particular that you've learned from asking why that you were then able to turn around and apply it to your day-to-day in a way that helped your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So we found, we're not the cheapest firm in town. And so when you're talking about building out a website for somebody, it's a lot different than the days of, oh, I need a website, it's going to cost you $5,000. We're not focused on just building out, templated websites and just throwing a logo on it. We build everything from scratch, really optimized for conversion optimization and lead generation. And that takes a lot of thought and strategy behind it. And one of the things that we really learned is we needed to step back and offer another product to our customers, because really what we were finding was that the budgets that we were putting together for projects were still somewhat limiting the clients that we could be working with. And it's really sad that when you have a bunch of people that have $20,000 budgets for websites and you can't really find a way to work with them on that, it's sad to see that that's a lot of revenue that you could lose throughout the year. So for us, it really made us think as an agency, listening to the feedback. Quite frankly, Justice, a lot of this came down to price for us, which is for us, how much work and effort can we do, and how can we optimize our own internal processes to drive down the cost of some of the things that they were having trouble absorbing. So things like marketing expenses were a big one for them. A lot of them still want resources over the year. They want somebody they can rely on to build out campaigns for them. And so we had to go back and really think critically as far as how can we reshape our product and the way that we're delivering it, where we're still giving them the same level of quality, but it's not necessarily the same bracket as, say, a $250,000 e-commerce site. And so that really allowed us to work with these clients, because, I'm going to learn lessons from a small client. I'm going to learn them from a big client. They're going to be very different types of lessons and problems to solve, but it keeps our development teams busy and it keeps them excited with different things. So if you're working on, say, a small brand, the company only has 10 people, sometimes that can be just as exciting as working with a global brand that everybody recognizes. And so that was really something for us where we would not have really thought about building that product out if we hadn't been asking our clients why they weren't signing with us.
Okay. So I want to shift gears a little bit now, and I want to hear about the company that you currently work for. Tell me about Known.
Yeah, so Known Creative. We're a digital strategy shop here in Boston and Salem, Massachusetts. Now, we actually worked with these guys, Justice, back at our hardware startup. They helped us out with some of our marketing and branding materials, and they've been doing really great work here in Massachusetts. They're working with, Wentworth Institute of Technology now, which is just a fantastic partnership that we've done with them. Some other exciting brands, like I said, the radio company, which hopefully you'll see up on our portfolio soon. But we also, one of the really exciting things about this agency, Justice, is that we don't limit ourselves very much. And one of the things that we've done to partner recently that's really allowed us to expand our offerings is we've actually partnered with a company called Core DNA. Now, Core DNA is it's a SaaS-based CMS platform, so a content management system similar to something like, implementing a WordPress or a Drupal site. Core DNA is truly something different, and it excites us as an agency because our team, they love to be on the creative side, and we want to expand our development opportunities a lot for these clients. But sometimes, that means you got to hire in a bunch more for your development team, which for us wasn't really the path that we were looking at for growth. So by partnering with Core DNA and using their platform, we can deliver global enterprise offerings to companies at a drastically reduced price in terms of development implementation costs. And so for them, it's a really unique product. And we're excited to be partnering with them and being able to use that for our clients. And so for Known Creative, I mean, you name it, with a digital strategy shop, we're looking at your technical problems, your brand issues. How can we optimize for lead generation and conversion optimization, A/B testing, any number of gamut where you've got a company where maybe they don't have an internal marketing team. Maybe they have one person there, but they don't have the resources to develop the assets to keep that brand alive online. That's really where we come in. And we look at, long-term partnerships, not necessarily one and done style projects.
I love it. I want to talk about the agency model because I've worked in agencies before. There are good agencies, there are bad agencies, there are bad agencies that sometimes do good work, and there's good agencies that sometimes do bad work.
Yes.
I'm curious, how do you think about aligning your interests with the interests of your clients?
Great question. So I'm very honest with any of the prospects that we talk with. And quite frankly, it's all about making more money, Justice. Our clients want to make more money. If a client comes to us and they want to make a website because they want it to be pretty, they might not have their priorities aligned. The reality is that they need to make a return on that investment. And we understand that and we respect that. So when we look to partner with a company, we're not looking to sell them a $50,000 website, hand it over, and walk away. What we look at doing is really looking at a brand for the long term, and we want to be there to see the results. Because I can build you a website today, but you're not going to see the results on it for months at a time, right? We're at the mercy of search engines to really cache a lot of that data and get you up there and have to see results from these campaigns takes time. And we want to be there for it. So what I really like to look for, Justice, when I look at a client, is somebody that can sustain that long-term relationship, because quite frankly, we all want to make more money. If I can work with somebody over a 5 to 10 year period of time, and we can build a relationship based on trust and understanding and working together, I'm going to make a lot more money off of that relationship than if I just built them the website and walked away.
So there's something here about being frank about everybody's motivations and establishing a style of communication that is very clear and straightforward.
Yeah, and I think this is really something that sets a lot of agencies apart from each other right now, where you say like some agencies are doing it wrong. Some agencies aren't focusing at all on the results. They focus on the design, and pleasing the customer where, oh, well, that's a really pretty logo. And, oh, I really like the image you chose there, and the font looks great. But what does that mean as far as getting somebody, a customer, and following them through that buyer's journey online and actually getting them to interact with your brand, right? I've seen a number of pretty websites that have terrible bounce rates, right?
Yeah.
And so when you look at this, this is where I think a lot of agencies get set aside from others, is where you're not just building for the design, you're building because you genuinely understand that the company, your client, needs to make more money. They need to make a return off of what they're investing in you.
Right.
And
Otherwise, they're not going to be a long-term client.
Exactly. So if I can get somebody that, say, is converting 0.5% of site visitors to interacting with their brand, and I can get that up to 6 or 7% in a matter of months, they're going to see the results from that, and that's going to reinforce the trust that they have in us. And they're going to want to continue to work with us because we're learning from those lessons. Now, they're not going to want to just fire us and go work for somebody else when the results are showing success, right? So that's really what we strive for, is looking for those opportunities. And that's what I love about my job, Justice, is that it allows us to really think about how can this business grow beyond just some website or a brand, a new logo. It's really, how can you guide this business through a digital landscape so that they can better understand their customers, better target those customers, and ultimately make more money.
I love it. I love it. So I want to ask you some questions. I wonder, you've got several big clients. You're working in these guys in their systems. What are the assets that you are working with? When you go to somebody, you need to build out their website or whatever. What are the credentials that you ask for? What is the access that you ask for? What is the information that you're using to operate within their environment, almost like a team member?
Yeah. So, well, with us, it's a little different, right? So with what they can give us at the beginning of a project, a lot of it comes on just a thumb drive, right? Or a Dropbox file. We get all their branding assets. When we build a site, we build it from ground up. Mm-hmm. So the only time I'm ever asking a client for credentials to something is if we're going to take over their database, or, we want to
doing deployments.
Exactly. But I see where you're going, Justice. And, one of the things that we typically find when we're looking at that at the beginning of a project, we start seeing what their current architecture is. And that gives us another opportunity, right? Because when we can start seeing certain vulnerabilities, it opens up another conversation, which is, take a large e-commerce site. When we start looking at what platforms they've been operating on, it's not uncommon to hear from people that are running, whether it be a Shopify store or a WooCommerce store, that they've been victim of some targeted attack on their e-commerce platform. We saw this ourselves firsthand, Justice, at our startup. We would get orders from parts of the country parts of the world rather, that were just blatantly fraudulent, but the system wasn't stopping it, right?
Right.
And that cost money. We were sending product around the world, paying for it to get there. We were paying for the product in the first place, and then we would end up with chargebacks.
So who are these people that do this? I mean, who is this guy in whatever country in wherever part of the world? Why? What is their motivation? What are they doing? What is the attack strategy?
I mean, most of the time, Justice, it's not somebody sitting there clicking it. They've written software to scrape and find a certain product and a certain price point and make the order, and hope that at random over a large, all the stolen credit cards that they're using are going to get cleared. Now, with something like with Core DNA, this is one of the things that I love about them and their offering, is that it gives us the opportunity to provide actual support staff to these clients that are professional hackers. So Core DNA actually, in their headquarters, has a team that is dedicated 24/7 to monitoring every site on their platform and being proactive on these attacks. So their e-commerce stores, people that go over to their platform see a drastic reduction in that, right? And it's because the platform itself at Core DNA have taken on that responsibility of putting somebody there on the front lines to watch for these things. Now, we rely at the mercy of things like Shopify sometimes, more too often than not, to do that for us. And this is where I think a lot of businesses are actually the most vulnerable, is that they don't truly understand the architecture that they're using, and they've never really had somebody there to guide them in the right direction. And that can cost you a lot of money. So it could also be maybe that website that you built, that you paid somebody $2,000 for, they built you an intranet to go along with it, and you're hosting all of your company files and intellectual property on, and there's absolutely no protection there, right? Or even better, Justice, when we ask for credentials, and they say that the username is admin and the password is password, it opens up the door for we need to fix that problem.
So how do you think about that discipline at Known? I mean, you have a lot of creatives. Creatives may or may not be aware, intuitively of how to securely store documents, intellectual property, client data. So how do you have these conversations in the office? How do you talk to, graphic designers about this?
Yeah. So as far as our internal team, I mean, we're pretty lucky with what we can do. We don't have a ton of digitally stored information. Obviously, we have tons of creative assets. We use them in the cloud. I'll be honest, we're big subscribers to the Google platform, Google Drive, Google Hangouts, everything. But I'll be honest, Justice, we don't think day to day about what if somebody comes in and hacks our personal IP. We have a Wi-Fi network in a shared office in a shared building up in Salem, and we don't have a way of actually monitoring on a day-to-day whether or not files are being kept safe. I think our problems are a little bit different than, let's say, you're in the healthcare space, right? So lucky for us, we don't have to lose much sleep over it. If we lose files, but actually, I'll take this back, Justice. We do have one client in particular where, and this really, it comes from the client. So when you're working with a much larger client, they have their own methods of file storing. Mm-hmm. And I use that as much as I can. If they tell me they want us on their platform, great. One less thing for us to be responsible for, because one of our designers could leave their iPad on the T, and great. Now all this new IP is out there. That can happen. I think lucky for us, Justice, we're having this conversation before it becomes a much bigger problem. I think that within 5 to 10 years from now, you're going to see the SMBs of the world really paying attention to threats and security and what they need to do to protect themselves. And I see that as a huge growing market coming for us in the future.
Are there any other markets that you're especially excited about? I know that there's one in particular that we've talked about.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I think there's a few. I think we're seeing some changes in this country. I think that recently here in Massachusetts, we've seen legislation for legalization of marijuana. Now, I'm not an advocate personally of recreational marijuana, but I do believe, and I've known people firsthand that have benefited from it in the medical use. And I think that it's unbelievable. Here in Massachusetts, we are the tech center of this country, more so than San Francisco. So take that, San Francisco.
So you see medical marijuana and recreational marijuana technology as being a market that's ripe for exploitation, so to speak.
Oh, but you can personally back the industry or not, support it or not, it's coming.
Yep.
Here in Massachusetts, one of the largest grow companies for medical marijuana in the country, called American, just bought out the old Sam Adams grow facility in southern Massachusetts. It's a 1.5 million square foot grow facility. So just take that into consideration and think about the businesses that are going to be booming in this economy. You're going to have businesses all throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that now for this industry, Justice, something that's interesting about it, even in the medical industry, they've been banned federally from advertising, right? So as these companies have been growing, they haven't really been thinking about marketing and advertising and branding. And now when you look at digital strategy, you don't need to be going and running an ad on Google keywords in order to generate a return on your digital strategy. You need to be building a well-designed website with user experience, taking full ownership of your brand. I mean, I think it's a dangerous space for some of these companies that are starting out that might have a really great technology, but they come out and position themselves as a recreational brand, which I personally don't want to work with. And they're limiting themselves. So some of these companies that we've actually been in communications with, and we've signed a couple already, really their issue is they want to make sure that their brand is targeting their most successful points of opportunity. And so in the state of Massachusetts and in the states that we're going to see in this country, the medical industry and the commercial industry outside of recreation is going to explode, and they are going to need these services in order to compete in the new landscape. And I mean, you know it, Justice. I know it. Any industry out there, it doesn't matter. When you look at a brand, you're making their judgments on that brand based on what you see on them online, right?
Right.
That's how I learned to trust a company. Is I look at how much effort are you putting into yourself to represent yourself. You know, at Known, we work on our website every week. We have objectives that we need to be accomplishing, whether it's updating case studies, putting out relevant content. And when you can see companies that aren't doing that, you can see that opportunity.
Okay. 2 more questions and then we're done. The first one is, you're saying that you do focus internal time on your own website for marketing purposes. What percentage of internal time goes to looking at your own website and updating your own website, doing your own sort of marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is that it's nothing that you ever really complete.
Right.
Right. It never stops. So you're always thinking, and what's great about our place is that we're doing this for our clients on a day-to-day basis. So we might learn a new trick or a new tool that we can deploy, and we'll test it out on our own site before we use it on our clients. So when we're thinking about the amount of time that we're spending, it's really every day we're thinking about it, but we do force ourselves into times where we say, look, guys, let's get together after hours. Lucky for us, none of us in the agency have children yet. So we have a lot of free time, and I go crazy if I'm working less than 60 hours a week. So, you know, we might say, let's get in on a Saturday. Everybody come on in. We'll do an internal hackathon, put some movies on the projector, grab some beers, and just get to work and have fun with it. And what's great about that is that we're doing exactly that. We're having fun with it. And when we have fun with it, I think it carries through in the creative work. And it allows us to have a lot more fun and really relate to people rather than building something that's just so dry, analytical, and devoid of anything that would want somebody to pick up the phone and actually have a conversation with us and not just get, oh, what are your rates? Okay, great. Let's have a conversation. What excites you? Let's get that person excited. And that's why we dedicate that time and try to have fun when doing it. But obviously, you know, there are those times where, you know, we do have to, it can be a little bit of a task, especially writing case studies can be a little bit of a pain, but the value in there and getting your team to understand that you can generate a return off of yourself. You know, the more content that you produce, that could lead to a sale, right? Somebody could be listening to this right now and hear something that I said or something that you said and be reaching out and shooting us an email next week, right? And that's the type of behavior that we should be encouraging.
Awesome. So last question. For that person who's listening right now, wants to reach out to you, where can they find you? And for the person that maybe doesn't have a good reason to reach out right this second, but has learned a lot today, what is your ask to them? What would you like listeners to walk away with from this conversation?
All right. I'll say this. You know what? I'll tell you real quick. If you want to check out our website, you want to see the work that we do, check it out at known.creative.co. But if you resonate with what we're talking about today as far as having a conversation, I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to give you my email address, and I'm going to give everybody my personal cell phone number.
Oh, my God.
I'm not afraid of people picking up the call, just picking up the phone and giving me a call. And if there's somebody out there that actually does that, I'd love to hear from you. Because I'm going to learn something from you because you have the tenacity that it takes to do something to push yourself forward. So you feel free to reach out to me at peter@knowncreative.co. And my number, you reach it on my, this is 207-649-5037. Don't spam me, but let's have a real conversation. I'm always there for it. If you've got a project you're working on, you want to get involved in this industry, you don't know what next steps you should take, you want to talk about a new cool restaurant, have that conversation. I mean, that's the best advice I can give.
Peter Dunbar, everybody, eating his own dog food. Thank you so much for your time, Peter.
Thank you, Justice.
Hey there. A few things before you go. If you enjoyed today's episode with Peter Dunbar, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening. Also, please leave us reviews on iTunes. Those reviews help us climb the iTunes charts and will expose more people to these interviews and to the Hacker Practice podcast. I am so grateful that you listened to this episode. If you have feedback of any kind, if you liked or didn't like the episode, if you have questions that you want me to ask Peter next season, go ahead and leave me some feedback at hackerpractice.com. That's hackerpractice.com. There's a forum on the home page. I really appreciate that feedback. I will look over it all myself, and I will respond to it myself. That's a good way to get in touch with me. So, 3 things. Leave me feedback at hackerpractice.com. Leave us a review on iTunes, and hit that subscribe button on iTunes or on YouTube, wherever you're listening. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this episode of Hacker Practice with Peter Dunbar.